My daughter divorced and invaded the house with her children, saying, "You will pay the bills for me and my new boyfriend, or we will make your life hell." I smiled and nodded. The next morning they screamed when the movers arrived. But that was just the beginning of the consequences they didn't expect. Why did the father agree so calmly? What clever revenge awaited the brazen family? Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Jesse Harrison. I'm 64 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. Spent 32 years working in real estate management before I retired. Built a decent life, a comfortable home on Hawthorne Boulevard. Always thought family was everything. Funny how wrong you can be about the people you raised. My daughter Danielle wasn't always like this. I remember when she was 7, pigtails bouncing as she ran to show me the macaroni necklace she'd made at school. "It's for you, Daddy," she'd said, eyes shining. I wore that thing to work for a week. But people change, or maybe they just show you who they really were all along. The divorce happened 6 months ago. Her ex-husband Mark was a decent guy, worked in IT, quiet, reliable. The marriage fell apart fast. Danielle met someone new before the ink was even dry on the separation papers. A guy named Brian Turner, 38, unemployed, full of big talk about business opportunities that never materialized. I met him once. He showed up at my house wearing a Rolex that was obviously fake and talked about his investment portfolio while borrowing $40 for gas. I should have seen what was coming. My daughter started calling more often after the divorce. At first, I thought she needed support, a shoulder to lean on. But the conversations always circled back to money. How expensive everything was. How Mark wasn't paying enough child support. How hard it was being a single mother. I helped when I could. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. My 2 grandkids, Madison and Ethan, needed things. I understood that. But then the requests got bigger, more frequent, more demanding. That morning, it was a Tuesday, middle of June, I was in my workshop restoring a 1920s pocket watch. The mechanism was delicate, required complete focus. I heard the front door slam open. Not knock, not ring the doorbell. Just bang open like someone owned the place. "Dad, we're here!" Danielle's voice echoed through my house. I set down my tools carefully, took a breath, and walked to the living room. They were already making themselves at home. Brian sprawled on my couch, feet up on the coffee table, remote in hand flipping through my TV. Madison, my 12-year-old granddaughter, was on her phone, ignoring everything. 9-year-old Ethan was pulling open my kitchen cabinets. "Grandpa, you got any good snacks?" he asked, not looking at me. Danielle stood in the center of the room, arms crossed. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it an aggressive shade of red. She looked older than 35, tired, angry. "We need to talk," she said. "Hello to you, too," I replied. "Would have been nice if you'd called first." "This couldn't wait," she gestured at Brian. "We've made a decision about our living situation." Brian didn't even look up from the TV. "Yeah, we're moving in." I blinked. "Excuse me." "We're moving in here," Danielle repeated, slower, like I was hard of hearing. "Brian and I talked about it. This house is too big for just you. You're retired. You don't need all this space. We need stability for the kids." "You're moving in," I said flatly, without asking. "I'm telling you," she corrected. "We're family. That's what family does. They help each other." Madison looked up from her phone for the first time. "Grandpa, I'm taking the front bedroom, the one with the big windows. That's mine now." Brian finally turned to face me. "Listen, old man, here's how this is going to work. You're going to pay our bills, all of them. Rent for Danielle's storage unit where her stuff is, my car insurance, the kids' school fees, food, utilities, everything. You've got the money. You've been sitting on this house for decades. It's time you contributed it to your family." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Contributed it?" I repeated. "Yeah." He stood up, walked closer. He was taller than me, younger, tried to use it to intimidate. "And if you don't like it, if you try to make this difficult, we'll make your life absolutely miserable. Won't we, Danielle?" My daughter nodded. Her eyes were hard. "We're not asking, Dad. We're telling you. You'll pay for everything, or we'll make every single day you have left unbearable. Trust me." Ethan pulled a box of crackers from my pantry, ripping it open. Madison was already heading upstairs. Brian smirked. I stood there, in the middle of my living room, watching my family dismantle my peace, like it was their right. 32 years in real estate taught me a lot of things. How to read people, how to read contracts, how to spot the exact moment someone thinks they've won. This was that moment. Danielle thought she had me cornered. Brian thought I was just some old man who'd roll over. They thought this was over before it started. I smiled. Actually smiled. All right, kids, I said quietly. You can stay. Danielle's face lit up with triumph. Smart choice, Dad. I'll take care of everything, I continued. Don't you worry about a thing. Brian clapped me on the shoulder. That's what I'm talking about. You're finally being reasonable. They didn't notice my expression, didn't catch the tone in my voice. They were too busy celebrating their victory. I walked back to my workshop and looked at the pocket watch on my table. The mechanism was exposed, every gear visible. It just needed the right pressure in the right place, and everything would fall into position. Timing is everything. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat in my workshop surrounded by ticking clocks. 47 of them, each one I'd restored myself over the years. The rhythmic sound usually calmed me. Not that night. I kept replaying Danielle's face, that cold certainty that I'd just bend over and take it. When did she become this person? I remembered her 16th birthday. We'd thrown a party at the house, invited all her friends. She'd wanted this specific cake from a bakery across town, some elaborate thing with fondant flowers. I'd driven an hour each way to get it. When I brought it home, she'd hugged me so tight. You're the best dad ever, she'd said. Where was that girl now? The next morning, I made coffee, got dressed, and drove downtown. My lawyer's office was on the 15th floor of Miller Tower. Raymond Oliver had handled my real estate transactions for 20 years. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was him. Jesse, he said, shaking my hand, what brings you in? I laid it out for him. Everything. The ultimatum. The threats. The casual way they'd invaded my home like conquering armies. Raymond listened, making notes. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. Let me look at your property documents, he said. He pulled up the files on his computer, scrolled through, then stopped. Interesting, he murmured. What? Your house. It's not technically in your name. Not anymore. My heart skipped. What are you talking about? 8 years ago, you set up a living trust. Remember? We did it for estate planning purposes. The house is owned by the Jesse Harrison Living Trust, not by you personally. You're the trustee, but you're not the owner on paper. The memory came back. After my wife passed, I'd reorganized everything, made sure my affairs were in order. The trust was supposed to simplify things if I died, avoid probate. Why does that matter? I asked. Raymond leaned forward, a slight smile on his face. Because it gives you options, legal options. Your daughter thinks she can just move in and demand you pay for everything. But the house isn't yours to give away. It belongs to a trust. And as trustee, you have fiduciary duties. You can't just let someone live there rent-free if it's not in the trust's best interest. Something clicked in my mind, gears turning, mechanisms falling into place. What are you saying? I'm saying, Raymond replied carefully, that if someone is going to live in a property owned by a trust, they need to be either a beneficiary with rights or a tenant with a lease. A tenant with a lease. I thought about Danielle's face when she'd given me that ultimatum, the smug certainty, the assumption that I was weak. Can you draft a lease agreement? I asked slowly. Of course, standard terms. What's the fair market rental value for a 4-bedroom house on Hawthorne Boulevard these days? Around $4,000 a month, I said. Maybe $4,200. Raymond nodded. I can have documents ready by tomorrow. I drove home thinking about timing, about mechanisms, about how a clock works, every piece dependent on every other piece, the whole thing operating on tension and release. Danielle had wound this clock, set it ticking, but she had no idea when the alarm would go off. When I got home, Brian was in my recliner, watching some action movie at full volume. Danielle was on her laptop at my dining table, Madison beside her scrolling through her phone. Ethan was playing a video game on my TV in the den. They'd taken over in less than 24 hours. Hey, Dad, Danielle called without looking up. We need to talk about the grocery situation. Brian and I made a list. We need about $600 for the week. 600, I repeated. Yeah, the kids have specific dietary needs. And Brian's trying this new protein shake thing. It's expensive. I walked past her to the kitchen, poured myself water, stayed calm. That night, I remembered another moment. Danielle was 19, home from college. She'd crashed her car, her fault, texting while driving. I'd been furious. Not about the car, about the recklessness. Actions have consequences, I'd told her. You can't just do whatever you want and expect someone else to fix it. She'd cried, apologized, promised to do better. Now here she was, 20 years later, doing exactly what I'd warned her about. The next day I came home with a smile on my face. Raymond had delivered. Danielle, I said, my voice warm, can we talk? You, me, and Brian? They gathered in the living room, suspicious. I've been thinking, I said, about what you said, about family helping family. And you're right. This house is too big for just me. Danielle's face softened. So you're okay with us staying? More than okay, I said. I've actually decided I'm going to move out. Silence. What? Brian said. I'm going to move to my rental property on Division Street. Smaller place. Easier for an old guy like me. And you can have this house. Danielle's eyes went wide. Are you serious? Completely. I've already called the moving company. They'll be here tomorrow morning. You'll have the whole place to yourselves. For the first time since the divorce, I saw genuine emotion on Danielle's face. Relief, joy, gratitude almost. Dad, thank you. Thank you so much. Brian grinned. See? I knew you'd come around, old man. There's just one thing, I said, pulling papers from my jacket. Some paperwork. Formality for the insurance company. Just needs your signature. Danielle barely glanced at it. What is it? Standard stuff. Just says you're responsible for the property while living here. Protects both of us. She signed without reading. 3 places, initialed, dated. I handed her an envelope. Some information about the house. Utility companies, that sort of thing. You'll need it. She tossed it on the counter without opening it. The next morning, the moving truck arrived right on schedule. I packed my clocks carefully, my clothes, my tools, watched as my life was loaded into boxes and carried away. Danielle and Brian stood on the porch, watching, victorious. They had no idea what they'd signed, no idea that the formality was a 12-month lease agreement with rent due the first of every month, no idea that the envelope contained bills they were now responsible for, utilities, property taxes, insurance. No idea that I'd just turned their victory into a very expensive trap. As I pulled away from 2847 Hawthorne Boulevard, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Danielle was waving, smiling. I smiled back. Timing is everything. And the clock was just starting to tick. The apartment on Division Street was smaller than my house, but it was mine. Quiet. No Brian sprawled on the furniture. No Madison demanding things. No Danielle's constant edge of hostility. I unpacked my clocks first, set them up on the shelves I'd installed 2 years ago when I bought this place as a rental investment. The ticking filled the silence, comforting, predictable. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt angry. Not hot anger, cold. The kind that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. The kind that makes you think clearly. I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Logged into the bank account I'd set up for managing my rental properties. Everything was there. Documentation going back a decade. Every lease, every payment, every legal transaction. Then I pulled up the security camera system I'd installed at the house. It was completely legal. I was still the trustee of the property, and Oregon law allows property owners to install security systems. I'd positioned 5 cameras strategically. Living room, kitchen, front entrance, back door, and the hallway upstairs. Audio and video, all cloud backed up. I clicked on the live feed. Danielle and Brian were in my living room. Their living room now, I suppose. Brian had his feet on the coffee table I'd built myself 20 years ago. Danielle was opening a bottle of wine. Madison was sprawled on the couch, still glued to her phone. Ethan was raiding the pantry. I can't believe he actually left, Danielle said, laughing. I thought he'd put up more of a fight. Told you he was weak, Brian replied. Old people are easy to manipulate. They're scared of dying alone, so they'll do anything to keep family around. $800, though. Danielle poured the wine. That was generous. Think we can get more? Definitely. We'll give him a few days, then hit him up for another grand. Tell him the kids need new clothes or something. Madison looked up. Can I get that new phone now? Sure, baby, Danielle said. Grandpa's paying. I watched them toast, celebrating their victory over the foolish old man who'd rolled over so easily. Something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about them moving in without asking. This wasn't about the disrespect or the demands. This was about who they'd become. Predators who saw kindness as weakness, who saw family as a resource to exploit. I thought about the lease they'd signed. Danielle hadn't even glanced at it, just scrawled her signature like it was nothing. That was her first mistake. The next morning, I drove to a small electronics shop I knew in southeast Portland. The owner, a guy in his 30s named Marcus, specialized in security systems. I need to upgrade my current setup, I told him. Better resolution, better audio quality, and I need it to be absolutely court admissible. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Legal situation? Potential eviction case down the line. Want everything documented properly? He nodded. I can do that. When do you need it? Today, if possible. Give me the address. I'll come by this afternoon. I gave him the Hawthorne address. The current residents won't be suspicious about upgrades, will they? Not if I tell them it's routine maintenance included in the property management. Happens all the time with rentals. Perfect. That evening, I checked the feeds again. The new cameras were crisper. The audio was crystal clear. Brian was in the kitchen, yelling at Danielle. You said this was going to be easy. You said your old man was loaded. He is, Danielle shot back. We just need to give him time. Time? I don't have time. I've got debts, Danielle. Real debts. People who don't like waiting. Then get a job. Jobs are for suckers. Your dad's sitting on a gold mine. This house alone is worth what? $600,000? $7. And he's got rental properties. He can afford to support us. He will, trust me. I saved that clip, filed it carefully in a folder labeled Evidence. Over the next 3 days, I watched and listened, documented everything. Day 1. Brian demanded I give him $3,000 for a business opportunity. When I said I needed to think about it, he called me a selfish old bastard who didn't care about family. Day 2. Danielle complained to a friend on the phone that I was being difficult, and she might need to make things uncomfortable for me to get me in line. Day 3. Madison told Ethan that Grandpa was stupid and easy to trick, and they should milk him for everything. Each conversation, each moment of cruelty, went into my files, time-stamped, dated, organized. I sat in my small apartment, watching people I'd loved turn into strangers, or maybe they'd always been strangers, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. My phone rang. Danielle. Hey, Dad, she said, voice syrupy sweet. How are you settling in? Fine, I said. Place is comfortable. Good, good. Listen, I was thinking, the kids really need some things for school. And with Brian looking for work, money's tight. Could you help us out? Maybe 2,000? 2,000, just like that. Danielle, I said slowly, when you signed those papers before I left, did you read them? Pause. What papers? The documents I gave you. Oh, those. Yeah, insurance stuff, right? Why? Just wondering. And the envelope I gave you with the house information? Still on the counter, I think. Why are you asking about this? No reason. Just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. So, about that 2,000? Let me think about it, I said. Dad, I'll call you back. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was something else. Something that felt almost like anticipation. I went to my workshop, just a corner of the apartment, really, and picked up a pocket watch I'd been restoring. A 1910 Waltham. Beautiful mechanism. Someone had broken the mainspring years ago, and it had sat in a drawer, forgotten. But with the right tools, the right patience, the right pressure applied, in exactly the right place. I installed the new mainspring, set the hands, wound it carefully. Tick, tick, tick. Perfect time. Perfect rhythm. I checked my phone. Almost midnight. In 8 days, July would arrive. Bills would start showing up at the house. Electric, water, gas, property tax notices, and of course the little reminder from Raymond Oliver about the rent due by August 1st. Danielle still hadn't opened that envelope, still had no idea what she'd signed. I set the watch down and smiled in the darkness. Let them celebrate a little longer. Let them feel safe and victorious. Every good trap needs time to set properly, and the best ones, the prey walks right into them without ever seeing the danger. I picked up my phone and texted Raymond. Proceed with documentation. I want everything court-ready by mid-July. His response came quickly. Understood. We'll have full eviction paperwork prepared. Just need your go-ahead when the time comes. I set the phone down and listened to my clocks ticking in the darkness. 47 different rhythms, all perfectly synchronized. Timing really is everything. The next morning, I woke early and drove to a notary office on Taylor Street. Shannon Clark, the notary public, had worked in real estate documentation for 20 years. Professional, thorough, exactly what I needed. Mr. Harrison, she said, shaking my hand, what can I do for you? I laid out the situation, not emotionally, just facts. The house and the trust, the signed lease agreement, the need to ensure every document was properly witnessed, notarized, and legally unassailable. Shannon reviewed the lease Danielle had signed, checked the notary stamp, verified the signatures. This is solid, she said, properly executed. They can't claim they didn't know what they were signing. Their signature is right here, witnessed and notarized. And you filed it with the county that very afternoon. Then you're covered. If they don't pay rent by the date specified, you're well within your rights to begin eviction proceedings. Oregon law is actually quite clear on this. What if they claim I coerced them? Family pressure, that sort of thing. Shannon shook her head. Your lawyer was present. A notary witnessed it. And if you have documentation of them demanding to live in the property. She raised an eyebrow. I have video and audio recordings, time-stamped, all legally obtained on property I'm responsible for. Then you're not just covered, you're bulletproof. When the time comes, any judge will see this as a straightforward tenant-landlord dispute. I thanked her and left. One more piece falling into place. Next stop, Raymond Oliver's office. Jesse, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I've been preparing the documentation you requested, but I want to make sure we're on the same page here. Once we file an eviction notice, there's no going back. This will permanently damage your relationship with your daughter. That relationship is already damaged, I said. The question is whether I'm going to let her destroy my peace for the rest of my life, or if I'm going to establish boundaries. He studied me for a moment. All right, here's what I've prepared. He laid out several documents. A formal notice to pay rent or quit. Eviction paperwork ready to file with Multnomah County Court. A timeline of events that would unfold if Danielle didn't pay. Under Oregon law, Raymond explained, if rent isn't paid by the due date, you can issue a 72-hour notice to pay or vacate. If they don't comply, we file for eviction. The court date typically comes within 2 to 3 weeks. And if they contest it, with the documentation you have, they'd lose. Judges see this all the time. Family disputes disguised as landlord-tenant issues. But the law is the law. If they signed a lease and didn't pay, they're in breach of contract. What about the kids? Will the judge consider that? The judge will consider what's legal, not what's emotional. You're not throwing your grandchildren into the street. You're evicting a tenant who refused to pay rent. If your daughter has nowhere to go, that's a consequence of her choices, not your responsibility. His words were cold, but true. I'd spent my whole life being responsible, being the safety net, being the one everyone could fall back on. Maybe it was time they learned to catch themselves. Prepare everything, I said. I want to be ready the moment rent comes due. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment and did something I'd been putting off. I called my cousin Robert. He lived in Seattle, and we'd always been close. I needed someone outside the situation to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. Jesse, Robert answered on the second ring. It's been months. How are you? I told him everything. The ultimatum, the move, the trap I'd set. Long silence when I finished. Rob, I'm here, just processing. That's your daughter we're talking about. I know. And you're really going to evict her? If she doesn't pay rent, yes. Another pause. You know what? Good. I never liked how she treated you after the divorce. The constant demands, the entitlement, Someone needed to set boundaries. I'm just surprised it took you this long. His support was unexpected but welcome. We talked for another hour. By the end, I felt more certain than ever that I was doing the right thing. The days crept forward. I watched the calendar, watched the camera feeds, watched Danielle and Brian settling into my house like they owned it. They threw a party that weekend. 20 people. Music blaring until 2 in the morning. Empty bottles littering the yard. Madison posted videos on social media. My house now? Thanks, Grandpa. I saved all of it. Monday arrived. I checked my watch. June 23rd. Time to make my announcement. I drove to the house and knocked on my own front door. Danielle answered, surprised to see me. Dad, what are you doing here? Can I come in? Need to talk to you and Brian? They gathered in the living room, wary now. Good. Let them feel uncertain. I've been thinking, I said, settling into the armchair, about this arrangement, about the house. Brian leaned forward. Yeah? What about it? This house is too big for me. I've realized that. And you all need space. Stability. So I've made a decision. Danielle's face lit up. Really? I'm going to move out. Permanently. Let you have the house. Silence. Shocked. Beautiful silence. You're serious? Danielle breathed. Completely. I've already found movers. They'll be here tomorrow morning to get the rest of my things. Then it's all yours. I watched Brian and Danielle exchange looks. Triumph. Disbelief. Greed. Dad, Thank you, Danielle said. This means everything. I just need you to sign some paperwork first. Formality for the insurance company. And I'll leave you an envelope with all the house information, utility contacts, that sort of thing. Sound good? Yes, absolutely. Whatever you need. I pulled out the documents Raymond had prepared. The lease agreement, disguised as insurance paperwork. Everything legal, everything proper, everything in plain English, if anyone bothered to read it. Danielle signed without reading. 3 places. Initialed. Dated. Perfect. I handed her the envelope. Everything you need to know is in here. Read it carefully. She set it on the counter without opening it. Thanks, Dad. The movers came the next morning, right on schedule. I supervised as they loaded my remaining possessions. My favorite chair. My tools. The rest of my clock collection. Danielle and Brian stood on the porch, watching. Victorious. Smug. See you around, old man, Brian called out. I'm sure you will, I replied. As the truck pulled away, I looked at the house one last time. The house I'd bought 30 years ago, where I'd raised Danielle, where my wife and I had built a life. It was just a building now. Bricks and wood and memories. What mattered was what came next. I drove to my apartment, unloaded my things, and set up my clocks. When everything was in place, I sat down with my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. First rent payment due, August 1st. Amount, $4,200. Property tax first installment due, August 15th. Amount, $1,950. Monthly utilities average, $735. Insurance monthly, $192. Total monthly cost to maintain the house, $7,077. Danielle's savings after her divorce, approximately $11,000, based on what she'd told me. Time until she'd be completely broke if she paid everything. Just over a month. Time until I could legally file for eviction if she didn't pay. 72 hours after August 1st. The math was beautiful. Clean. Inevitable. I closed my laptop and walked to my workshop corner. Picked up the 1910 Waltham pocket watch I'd just finished restoring. Opened the case. Watched the mechanism work. Every gear perfectly placed. Every spring properly tensioned. All the pieces working together toward a single, predictable outcome. I smiled. Danielle thought she'd won. Thought she'd manipulated her old, weak father into giving her everything she wanted. She had no idea she'd just signed her own eviction notice. The trap was set. The clock was ticking. Now all I had to do was wait. The first week passed quietly. Too quietly. I watched the camera feeds from my apartment, sipping coffee as Danielle and Brian settled into their new home like conquering monarchs. They threw a party that first weekend. I counted 23 people. Music thundering through the walls until 3 in the morning. Empty beer bottles scattered across my lawn. Madison posted it all on social media. My house now. Life is good. I saved every post, every photo, every video. They were building my case for me, one reckless celebration at a time. The following Tuesday, I noticed something on the camera feed. Danielle was sitting at my dining table, her dining table now, I suppose, staring at a stack of envelopes. Her face had that expression I remembered from when she was young and realized she'd made a mistake. Confusion mixed with the beginning of panic. She picked up her phone and called me. Dad? Danielle, how's everything going? Why am I getting bills? I took a sip of coffee. What kind of bills? Electric, water, internet, gas. They're all in my name now. Why are they in my name? Because you're responsible for the house, honey. Remember? You wanted it. But I thought you'd still pay for... Pay for what? I don't live there anymore. You do. When you signed the paperwork, you agreed to take on all responsibilities for the property. Silence. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, rusty from disuse. How much are these bills? She asked quietly. Should be around $700 a month, give or take. Depends on usage. You've been throwing a lot of parties, so probably higher this month. $700? Roughly. Plus there's the property tax payment coming up. Should be getting a notice about that soon. Property tax? $1,800 every 6 months. First payment's due middle of next month. More silence. Then, Dad, I can't afford all this. Then maybe you should get a job, Danielle. I have kids to take care of. So did I. Still worked every day for 32 years. Funny how that works. She hung up on me. I smiled and went back to watching the cameras. 2 days later, I saw her open the envelope I'd left on the counter, the one she'd ignored for over a week. She pulled out the papers, started reading, stopped, went back to the beginning, read again. Her face went through a fascinating transformation. Confusion, disbelief, shock, then anger, pure incandescent rage. She grabbed her phone and dialed. I answered on the third ring. You made me sign a lease? Good morning to you, too. A lease? For $4,200 a month? That's the fair market rate for a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood. Raymond Oliver verified it. I'm not paying rent to live in my father's house. It's not my house, Danielle. It belongs to the living trust. And as trustee, I have a legal obligation to ensure the property generates appropriate income or is occupied by designated beneficiaries. You're not a beneficiary, so you're a tenant with a signed lease. This is illegal. You tricked me. I did nothing illegal. You signed a document without reading it. That's not trickery. That's carelessness. Every word of that lease is standard language. Your signature is notarized. It was witnessed by a lawyer. You can contest it if you want, but you'll lose. We'll see about that. She hung up again. I poured myself another coffee and checked my spreadsheet. Bills they'd received so far, $735. Property tax notice arriving, 3 days. Rent due date, 11 days. Their approximate remaining savings, $10,200. The clock was ticking faster now. That weekend I drove past the house, just to see it. The lawn needed mowing. There was damage to the mailbox. Someone had backed into it during one of their parties. Paint was already chipping on the front porch steps, where someone had spilled beer. 3 weeks. They'd had the place for 3 weeks and were already destroying it. I took photos, added them to my documentation. The next Monday, I received a call from Raymond Oliver. Jesse, your daughter hired an attorney, Harold Chen. He's requesting a meeting to discuss the lease agreement. What's there to discuss? His position is that you coerced her into signing under false pretenses, that you misrepresented the nature of the document. Can he prove that? Not from what I've seen. The lease is clearly labeled. The terms are in plain English. She had the opportunity to read it before signing. Do you want to meet with them? Sure. Why not? Should be entertaining. We met 2 days later at Raymond's office. Danielle showed up with her attorney, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, who clearly handled a lot of landlord-tenant disputes on the cheap. Mr. Harrison, he began, my client feels she was misled. Your client didn't read what she signed, Raymond interrupted. That's not being misled. That's being negligent. The document was presented as insurance paperwork. No, I said calmly. I said it was paperwork that needed to be signed. A formality, which it was, A formal lease agreement. I never specified what kind of paperwork. She assumed? Harold Chen looked at Danielle. She looked away. The rent amount is excessive, he tried. $4,200 for a family member? It's market rate, Raymond countered. I can provide comps for similar properties in the neighborhood. Some are higher. My client doesn't have the means to pay. Then she shouldn't have signed a lease committing her to pay. Look, mister Chen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your client has a legal obligation to pay rent. If she doesn't pay by the 1st of next month, we'll file for eviction. It's that simple. Danielle finally spoke. Dad, please. I'm your daughter. Madison and Ethan are your grandchildren. You're really going to throw us out? I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the desperation, the anger underneath it, the entitlement that still burned in her eyes even now. You came to my home, I said quietly, with your boyfriend and your kids, and told me I'd pay your bills, or you'd make my life miserable. You threatened me, Danielle, in my own house. You treated me like I was nothing more than a wallet. So now you're facing the consequences of your choices. We're family, yes, and family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. She stood up. Fine, we'll pay your stupid rent. Harold Chen looked alarmed. Ms. Harrison, I don't think... We'll pay it. Happy now, Dad? I smiled. I'll be happy when the check clears. They left. Raymond closed the door and turned to me. She doesn't have the money, does she? No, but I'll give her credit for one thing. She's committed to the lie. 3 days later, the rent due date arrived. No check, no payment, nothing. I waited 72 hours as required by Oregon law. Then I sent Raymond the go-ahead. He filed the eviction notice that afternoon. The knock came exactly when I expected it. 2 days after we filed the eviction paperwork, loud, aggressive pounding on my apartment door, I checked the peephole. Brian, face red, fists clenched. I called 911 first, then opened the door with the chains still on. You've got a lot of nerve, he shouted, trying to evict us like we're nothing. I'm not trying. I am evicting you. You didn't pay rent. That rent is criminal. You're a con artist. I'm a landlord. You're a tenant who signed a lease and broke it. Now you're trespassing at my residence and harassing me. The police are on their way. His face did something interesting. Went from red to white in about 2 seconds. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. I'd leave now if I were you, I said, unless you want to add a police report to your already impressive legal problems. He backed away, pointing a finger at me. This isn't over, old man. Actually, it is. You just don't realize it yet. I closed the door and waited. The police arrived 7 minutes later, took my statement, went to the house to talk to Brian, gave him an official warning about harassment. I added the police report to my growing file of documentation. The following Monday, Danielle's attorney called Raymond. My client is prepared to contest the eviction. On what grounds? The lease is unconscionable. The rent is excessive. Mr. Harrison misrepresented. We've been through this. File your response. See you in court. Raymond hung up and called me. They're going to fight it. Good, I said. I want them to. I want every bit of their desperation on record. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. During that time, I watched them scramble. Watched Danielle try to borrow money from friends, family, anyone who'd listen. Watched her savings account. Yes, I'd legally obtained access to verify her ability to pay rent. Dropped to $6,200. Then $4,100. Then $2,800. She was spending faster than water circling a drain. I received a call the week before the hearing. Danielle, her voice small and broken. Dad, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. You had 3 weeks to pay rent. You chose to spend that time fighting me instead of finding a solution. I don't have the money. Then you shouldn't have signed a lease you couldn't afford. We're family. You keep saying that, like it's a magic word that erases everything you did. Family doesn't threaten each other, Danielle. Family doesn't move in uninvited and demand financial support. Family doesn't treat someone like an ATM. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. And now you're learning that mistakes have consequences. The kids, Dad. Think about Madison and Ethan. And there it was. The trump card. The guilt lever she always pulled. I'm thinking about them, I said. I'm thinking about what they're learning from watching you. That you can threaten people and face no consequences. That you can sign contracts without reading them and someone will bail you out. That you never have to be responsible for your own choices. I'm doing them a favor, Danielle. I'm teaching them the lesson you never learned. Silence, then quietly, I'll never forgive you for this. I can live with that. She hung up. The day of the hearing arrived. I dressed carefully. Conservative suit, pressed shirt. I wanted to look like what I was, a responsible property owner dealing with an irresponsible tenant. The courthouse was busy. Multnomah County handled dozens of eviction cases every week. We were just another number. Raymond and I sat at one table. Danielle and Harold Chen at another. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes, clothes rumpled. Brian wasn't with her. Smart move on her part, probably. The judge entered. Honorable Patricia Reeves, according to the nameplate. Mid-50s, stern face, no-nonsense demeanor. She'd clearly heard every excuse in the book. Case number 2-02-5-EV-4782, she said. Harrison Living Trust versus Danielle Harrison. This is an eviction proceeding for non-payment of rent. Ms. Harrison, you've filed a response contesting the eviction? Yes, Your Honor. Danielle stood. This is my father. He tricked me into signing a lease for his house, a house I thought he was giving me. He's trying to evict his own daughter and grandchildren. Ms. Harrison, the judge interrupted, this is a legal proceeding, not a family therapy session. Did you sign the lease agreement? Yes, but did you read it before signing? Pause. No, but he said, did he physically force you to sign? Threaten you with harm? Hold a weapon to your head? No, Your Honor, but then you signed a legal contract of your own free will. Mr. Oliver, please present your case. Raymond stood and laid it out beautifully. The signed lease, the notarization, the witness statements, the missed rent payments, the documentation of their threats and harassment, all captured on legally obtained video and audio recordings. Your Honor, he concluded, this is a straightforward case of tenant non-payment. The defendant had every opportunity to read the lease before signing. She had 3 weeks to pay rent or vacate. She chose to do neither. We're simply asking the court to enforce the terms of the contract she voluntarily entered. Judge Reeves reviewed the documents, watched snippets of the video, listened to the audio of Danielle threatening to make my life miserable. Her expression never changed. Ms. Harrison, she said finally, do you have the rent money? No, Your Honor, but if you give me more time. How much time have you had already? 3 weeks, but... And in those 3 weeks, did you seek employment, file for assistance, make any effort to honor your contractual obligations? Danielle's mouth opened, closed. She looked at her attorney, who looked at his shoes. I find for the plaintiff, Judge Reeves said. Ms. Harrison, you are hereby ordered to vacate the property within 15 days. If you pay the full amount, owed $8,400 in back rent, plus $1,200 in court costs, you may remain. Otherwise, eviction will proceed. If you fail to vacate voluntarily, the sheriff's office will remove you. Next case. Danielle just stood there, frozen. Her face had gone completely white. Her hands trembled as she gripped the table edge. Your Honor, Harold Chen tried weakly, perhaps we could arrange a payment plan. Mr. Chen, your client signed a lease and failed to pay. The landlord is under no obligation to negotiate. If Ms. Harrison wants to remain in the property, she'll pay what she owes. If not, she'll leave. That's how rental agreements work. We're done here. The gavel came down. Danielle turned to look at me. Her eyes were red, tears streaming down her face. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She looked exactly like she had when she was 6 years old, and realized she'd done something that couldn't be undone. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something twist in my chest. Then I remembered her face when she'd invaded my home. The smug certainty, the cold demands, the threats. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out. Raymond caught up with me in the hallway. 15 days, he said. Then the sheriff enforces the order. Good, I said. Jesse, you okay? I thought about it. Was I okay? I'd just effectively made my daughter homeless, but she'd made that choice herself. I just held up the mirror. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. Behind us, I heard Danielle's sobs echoing through the courthouse corridor, high and desperate and furious all at once, the sound of consequences arriving right on schedule. The 15 days moved like a countdown, each one bringing Danielle closer to the reality she'd been trying to deny since that courtroom door closed behind her. I didn't take any pleasure in it, not exactly, but I won't lie and say I didn't feel a sense of rightness, like a mechanism finally clicking into place after being misaligned for too long. The day after the hearing, Danielle called me. No yelling this time, just exhaustion. "I'm trying to get the money," she said. "I've called everyone I know. And no one has $9,000 to loan me, Dad, not without collateral, and I don't have anything to offer. You could get a job, start making payments." "In 15 days? How much could I possibly make?" "You should have thought about that before you signed a lease you couldn't afford." Silence. "Then, you planned this. From the beginning. The trust, the lease, moving out, it was all planned." Finally, the light bulb flickering on. "I gave you exactly what you demanded," I said. "The house. Free access. No interference. You just didn't read the fine print." "That's not—" She stopped. Started again. "I'm your daughter." "Yes, and you threatened me in my own home. You moved in without asking. You demanded I pay for your boyfriend's lifestyle. What did you think would happen, Danielle? That I'd just accept that forever? I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought you loved me." That one hurt, aimed right at the soft spot every parent has. "I do love you," I said quietly. "That's why I'm teaching you this lesson, instead of just cutting you out of my life completely. You needed to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people, family or otherwise, like ATMs, that contracts mean something. This lesson is going to make me homeless. No, your choices are going to make you homeless. I gave you options. You chose not to take them." She hung up. Over the next week, I watched the cameras, watched them pack, watched Brian and Danielle fight, about money, about blame, about whose fault this was. Watched Madison cry when she realized they were really leaving. Watched Ethan ask questions no one wanted to answer. 8 days before the eviction deadline, Danielle's cousin Robert called me. We'd talked before, right after I set the trap. Now he had news. "She called me," he said, "asking for money. Begging, really." "Did you give it to her?" "No. I told her the same thing you did, that she made her bed. But Jessie, she's really desperate. Talking about borrowing from loan sharks, payday lenders, crazy stuff. Let her talk. She won't actually do it. She's smarter than that." "I hope you're right." So did I. 5 days before the deadline, something changed. I was watching the camera feed when I saw Danielle pull out her laptop and start searching for something. Her face was set, determined, the way she used to look when she was younger and decided to tackle a problem head on. She spent 3 hours online, making calls, sending emails. The next day, a moving truck appeared, not the sheriff, a regular moving company. They started loading her belongings. She was leaving early. I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, more like sadness. Watching your child give up even when they needed to give up isn't satisfying. It's just sad. But then I saw what she was doing. She wasn't just moving out. She was stripping the house, taking things that weren't hers. The curtains I'd bought, the patio furniture, even some of the light fixtures. I called Raymond immediately. "She's taking property that wasn't included in her personal belongings. What can we do?" "Document everything, photos, video, itemized list. We can file a separate claim for stolen property if we need to." I documented it all. Every missing item. Every piece of furniture that belonged to the house, not to her. 3 days before the deadline, she was gone. The house empty. The door locked with her key left on the kitchen counter along with a note. "You won. Happy now?" I drove over to check the damage. It was worse than the cameras showed. Holes in walls where she'd ripped down decorations. Stains on the carpet. The back door hanging crooked on its hinges. Trash everywhere. They'd destroyed it. In 3 months, they'd destroyed a house I'd maintained for 30 years. I took photos of every room, every piece of damage, added it all to my file. Then I called the company I'd set up 10 years ago, Cascade Property Holdings. Time for the final move. Raymond handled the paperwork. The living trust sold the house to my LLC for $655,000, a fair price, properly appraised, legally clean. The trust paid off its obligations. The LLC took ownership, and I remained in control of it all. The beauty of it was that Danielle would never know. She thought some random investment company had bought the property. She'd never connect it to me, never realized that her father now owned the house outright, free and clear, with no trust complications. She thought she'd lost. She didn't realize I'd won twice, once by teaching her a lesson and once by consolidating my assets. 2 days after she moved out, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison?" A woman's voice, professional. "Yes?" "This is Laura Chen from Cascade Property Holdings, one of the property management staff I'd hired years ago. She didn't know I owned the company. I'm calling about the property at 2847 Hawthorne Boulevard. We've completed our inspection, and I need to inform you that the previous tenant caused approximately $18,000 in damage." $18,000? "Yes, sir. Walls, flooring, fixtures, doors. We have documentation if you need it for legal proceedings. Send it to my attorney, Raymond Oliver. Will do. Also, we're moving forward with repairs. Should be completed in 3 weeks." "Thank you, Laura." I hung up and smiled. Danielle didn't just lose the house. She was now potentially liable for damages that would take her years to pay off if I chose to pursue it. But I wouldn't. The lesson was taught. The point was made. Pushing further would just be cruelty. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Danielle. Her new address, a small apartment complex on the far east side of Portland. A rough neighborhood. Cheap rent. Then another message. "I hope you're satisfied. Brian left. The kids hate me. I have nothing." I stared at the message for a long time. Finally, I typed back, "You have the opportunity to rebuild, to show your kids what responsibility looks like, to become the person you're capable of being. That's not nothing." She didn't respond. The following week started quietly. Too quietly. I'd learned not to trust silence. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Raymond, his voice tight. "We have a problem. Danielle's attorney filed a motion claiming fraud and elder abuse." "What?" "He's arguing that you manipulated her into signing the lease under false pretenses, that you took advantage of her financial distress to evict your own daughter, that this constitutes elder abuse because she was caring for you and you retaliated." I laughed, actually laughed. "She was caring for me?" "That's the claim. Says she moved in to help you, that you were lonely and struggling, that she provided companionship and assistance. Then you turned on her. We have video evidence of her threatening me, audio of her demanding money, documentation of everything." "I know, but it's going to court again. She's trying to vacate the eviction order and sue for damages. Emotional distress, wrongful eviction, elderly manipulation. She's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." "When's the hearing?" 2 weeks. Can you come by tomorrow? We need to prepare." I drove to Raymond's office the next morning. He had the new filing spread across his desk. "This is desperate," he said, and frankly, not well argued. But desperate people can be unpredictable. The judge will have to hear it. What's our response? The truth. We show the timeline. We show that she initiated contact with threats. We show the security footage. We demonstrate that every action you took was legally sound and properly documented. We prove she's lying. And if the judge believes her, Raymond shook his head, they won't. Not with what we have. But we need to be prepared for her to get emotional, to make this about family rather than law. Let her. The law is on our side. But over the next few days, things escalated. Danielle started posting on social media. Carefully worded posts about elderly manipulation and family betrayal, about how her father had stolen her home and abandoned his grandchildren. She was building a narrative, painting herself as the victim. People who didn't know the full story started reaching out to me, distant relatives, old family friends, asking if what they'd heard was true. If I'd really evicted my daughter and grandchildren, I didn't respond, didn't engage. But it bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Then a week before the hearing, she tried something different. My cousin Robert called again. "Jesse, Danielle contacted my brother Frank, asked him to testify that you've been declining mentally for years, that you're not competent to manage your own affairs. I'm 64 and sharper than most 30-year-olds. That's ridiculous. I know. Frank told her no, but she's trying to build a case that you're not mentally fit, that someone, probably her, should be managing your finances. The audacity of it actually impressed me. She was going for broke. If she couldn't win on the facts, she'd try to have me declared incompetent. Let her try, I said. I've got 32 years of real estate management, current rental properties I run successfully, and a lawyer who can vouch for my mental clarity. Just be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. He was right to worry. 2 days later, someone broke into my apartment. I came home from coffee with an old colleague to find my door jimmied open. Nothing major taken. My TV was still there, my laptop, but my files were gone. The documentation I'd kept at home, the backup copies of the security footage. I called the police, filed a report, then called Raymond. They took the files, I told him. Do you have other copies? Everything's backed up digitally. Cloud storage. They got physical copies, that's all. Then they accomplished nothing except adding breaking and entering to their problems. If we can prove it was them, I have security cameras in my apartment hallway. We'll see who it was. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Brian, wearing a hoodie, keeping his head down, but unmistakably Brian. I gave it to the police. Now he was facing criminal charges, and Danielle's case was falling apart before it even started. The day of the hearing arrived. I walked into the courthouse expecting another straightforward session. Instead, I found a media circus. Danielle had tipped off a local news station. They were there with cameras, interviewing her on the courthouse steps. My father is a sick man, she was saying, tears streaming. He needs help, and instead of getting him that help, I'm being punished for trying to care for him. I walked past without comment. Let her perform for the cameras. Inside the courtroom, the truth would matter more than the theater. Judge Reeves was back on the bench. She looked annoyed. Ms. Harrison, she said once we were all seated, you're back in my courtroom with a motion to vacate my previous order. This better be good. Danielle's attorney stood. Your Honor, new evidence has come to light suggesting Mr. Harrison manipulated my client while experiencing cognitive decline. Do you have medical documentation of this cognitive decline? Well, no, but testimony from doctors, mental health professionals, anyone qualified to make such an assessment? We have testimony from family members who've noticed, family members who would financially benefit from having Mr. Harrison declared incompetent. Silence. That's what I thought. What else do you have? The attorneys stumbled through arguments about elder abuse, about family duty, about the moral obligation of parents to children. None of it legal, all of it emotional. Judge Reeves let him finish, then turned to Raymond. Mr. Oliver? Raymond stood, calm and prepared. He presented our evidence systematically, the timeline. The security footage, including Brian's break-in at my apartment, the documentation of threats, my clean medical records, letters from my accountant and financial advisor confirming my mental competence. Then he played the audio from the cameras. Danielle's voice, clear as day. We'll make your life miserable if you don't pay for everything. The courtroom went silent. Your Honor, Raymond concluded, this is not a case of elder abuse or manipulation. This is a case of a woman who made poor choices, faced legal consequences, and is now trying to weaponize the court system to avoid those consequences. Mr. Harrison acted within his rights at every step. The defendant is the one who committed fraud by claiming she was a caretaker when she was actually an extortionist. Judge Reeves looked at Danielle. Her expression was cold. Ms. Harrison, your motion is denied. Furthermore, if you file any more frivolous claims in my court, I will hold you in contempt. The original eviction order stands. This matter is closed. Now get out of my courtroom. Danielle stood, shaking. She looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, she hissed as she passed. Yes, I said quietly. It is. She stormed out. The cameras were waiting. I watched through the window as she gave another tearful interview, claiming the system had failed her. But inside, in the place where it mattered, I'd won. Raymond clapped me on the shoulder. Well done. Is it really over? Unless she appeals. But she has no grounds, no money for a lawyer, no case. Yes, Jesse, it's over. I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed, a message from the Cascade Property Holdings renovation team. Repairs complete. Property ready for occupancy. I smiled. Time to go home. The final week of the eviction period played out like the last movements of a symphony. All the pieces falling into place, one after another, inevitable and complete. The sheriff arrived at the house on the appointed day. I wasn't there. Didn't need to be. I watched from my apartment via the security cameras I'd never disabled. Watched as the official in his uniform knocked on the door. Watched as Danielle answered, her face a mask of exhausted defeat. "Ms. Harrison," he said, holding up the court order, "I'm here to enforce the eviction. You have until 5 o'clock today to vacate the premises. If you're not gone by then, I'm authorized to remove you and your belongings." She didn't argue, didn't cry, just nodded and turned back inside. Brian's truck was already gone. He'd left 3 days earlier, right after their final blowout argument. I'd watched that too. Him screaming at her that this was all her fault. Her screaming back that he was a useless leech. Madison had cried. Ethan had hidden in his room. And I'd felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness. Just the cold certainty that this was what needed to happen. Now I watched Danielle and the kids load their remaining belongings into a rental van. Not much left. They'd already moved most of it to their new apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom on the east side, in a neighborhood where car alarms went off at night and the nearby convenience store had bars on the windows. The rent there was $1,400 a month, more than Danielle could afford without a job. But she'd signed that lease too, desperate and running out of options. Some people never learn to read before they sign. By 4 o'clock, they were done. The van pulled away, Madison's face in the rear window, looking back at the house, at what could have been hers if her mother had made different choices. The sheriff did a final walkthrough, confirmed the property was vacant, and left. I sat in my apartment and looked at the empty house on my screen. My house. Technically Cascade Property Holdings' house, but that was just paperwork. It was mine. I'd won. Completely. Utterly. In every way that mattered. My phone rang. Danielle, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "It's done," she said. Her voice was flat. "Dead. We're out." "I know. You destroyed my life." "No, Danielle, I showed you the consequences of your choices. There's a difference. You planned this from the beginning." Her voice rose, emotion finally breaking through. "The trust, the lease, the cameras, everything. You set me up. I gave you exactly what you demanded, a place to live, freedom from my interference. You just didn't bother to understand the terms. I'm your daughter, and you came into my home with threats and demands. You treated me like an ATM. You showed me no respect, no love, no consideration. What did you expect me to do? Just accept it?" Silence, long and heavy. "Where are you living?" I asked, though I already knew. "Apartment on 82nd Avenue. 2 bedrooms. Kids share a room." She laughed, bitter and broken. "The neighborhood is terrible. The schools are worse. Madison cries every night. Ethan asks when we're going home. You can tell them this is home now, and that home is what you make it, not what you take from someone else. I hate you. I know. But maybe someday you'll understand why I did this. Maybe you'll teach your kids the lesson you never learned, that you can't threaten and manipulate people without consequences. That contracts mean something. That responsibility matters. Some father you are. Some daughter you were." I hung up, sat there in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by the ticking of my clocks. 47 different rhythms, all perfectly synchronized, all keeping perfect time. I'd spent 3 months executing this plan, 3 months of careful documentation, legal maneuvering, strategic patience, 3 months of watching my daughter self-destruct while I held the tools of her destruction in my hands, waiting for the right moment to use them. And now it was done. I should have felt triumphant, victorious. Instead, I just felt tired, but also peaceful. For the first time since Danielle had crashed into my life with her ultimatums and her boyfriend and her entitled demands, I felt at peace. My phone buzzed again, a message from Raymond. Final eviction complete. Property legally vacant. Cascade ownership transfer finalized. You're clear to move back whenever you want. Whenever I want. I looked around my small apartment. I'd gotten used to it over these months. The quiet, the simplicity, the lack of drama. But it wasn't home. Home was 2847 Hawthorne Boulevard, with its workshop and my clock collection and the porch where I used to sit and watch the evening sky turn purple over Portland. I texted back, "I'll be there tomorrow." Then I set my phone down and walked to my workshop corner, picked up the last clock I'd been working on, a 1925 Hamilton pocket watch. Beautiful mechanism. Someone had let it run down years ago and it had seized up, the mainspring locked. But I'd fixed it, cleaned every gear, oiled every pivot, replaced the broken parts, and now it ran perfectly, keeping time like it was meant to. I wound it carefully and listened to it tick. Tomorrow, I'd go home. Tomorrow, I'd start putting my life back together. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet and listened to my clocks measure out the seconds of a job well done. Moving back into the house felt surreal. The renovation team had done excellent work. You'd never know it had been nearly destroyed just weeks earlier. Fresh paint, new carpet, repaired walls, everything cleaned and restored. Better than it had been before, actually. I spent the first day just walking through the rooms, reacquainting myself with the space, setting up my workshop, arranging my clocks on their shelves, making coffee in my own kitchen. It felt right, like putting on a comfortable old coat after wearing something stiff and formal for too long. The second day, I met with Raymond to finalize the last of the paperwork. "Congratulations," he said, shaking my hand. "You now own this property free and clear through your LLC. No trust complications, no tenant issues. Clean title. What about the damage claim? $18,000 in documented losses. You could pursue it if you want. Sue Danielle for restitution." I thought about it, about adding one more layer of consequences, one more reminder of what her choices had cost. "No," I said finally. "The lesson's been taught. Pushing further would just be cruel." Raymond nodded. "Probably wise. Besides, she has no assets. You'd win a judgment you could never collect." "Exactly." We finished the paperwork, shook hands again. He left. I sat in my living room, my actual, legal, uncontested living room, and felt the weight of the past 3 months finally lift off my shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. That evening I was setting up my favorite chair on the porch when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. "This is Danielle. New phone. I wanted you to know. I found a job. Cashier at Fred Meyer. It's not much, but it's a start. Madison and Ethan are adjusting. Slowly. I'm trying to do better. To be better. I don't know if you care, but I thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the silence speak for itself. But another part, the part that remembered the little girl with pigtails running to show me her macaroni necklace, couldn't quite let go. I didn't respond to the text, didn't reach out, didn't offer help or encouragement or forgiveness. But I saved the number, just in case. Maybe someday, years from now, when she'd proven she'd really changed, when she understood what responsibility meant, when she'd rebuilt herself into someone worthy of trust. Maybe then, but not today. Today was about me, about reclaiming my peace, about sitting on my porch in my house with my life back under my control. I made myself coffee and sat in my chair as the evening sky turned that particular shade of purple that only happens in Portland in late September. The air was cooling. Leaves were starting to turn. The neighborhood was quiet. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waved from across the street. "Good to see you back, Jesse." "Good to be back," I called. And it was. It really was. I thought about the past 3 months, about the plan I'd executed with such precision, about watching Danielle realize, step by step, that she'd been outmaneuvered from the very beginning, about the look on her face in that courtroom when the judge ruled against her, about Brian's face on the security footage when the police showed up to arrest him for breaking into my apartment, about the moment when she finally understood that her father, the old man she thought was weak and easy to manipulate, had played her like a chess master plays a beginner. Those moments had been satisfying, not in a cruel way, but in the way that justice always satisfies, the way that boundaries once established bring peace. I wasn't a vindictive person, never had been, but I also wasn't a doormat, and sometimes the people you love need to learn that lesson the hard way. I finished my coffee as the last light faded from the sky. Stars were coming out. The city sounds of Portland hummed in the background. Cars on Hawthorne, distant music, the comfortable noise of life happening. Somewhere across town, Danielle was probably putting her kids to bed in that cramped apartment, probably worrying about money, about bills, about how she'd make it through the next month. Those were her problems now, not mine. I'd given her the tools to succeed, a clear lesson about consequences, about responsibility, about the importance of reading what you sign. What she did with those tools was up to her. I stood, stretched, and walked back inside. My workshop was calling. I had a 1910 Waltham pocket watch that needed a new crystal. Delicate work. The work that demands steady hands and total concentration, the kind I truly loved. As I sat down at my workbench and reached for my tools, a smile crossed my face. Justice doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it takes months of meticulous preparation. Sometimes it calls for patience, precision, and the discipline to step back and let the person tie their own noose with the rope they've been given. But when it finally lands, when every piece falls perfectly into place and the whole mechanism runs flawlessly and reliably, it's worth every second of waiting. Just like a beautifully restored clock, justice keeps impeccable time. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.